Hi, and welcome to a Nectara conversation. I am your host, Pascal Tremblay, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Nectara. It's a psychedelic wellness platform that helps support people along their journey, healing and exploring psychedelic medicines. And today I'm joined by my really good friend, Chris Rodman. Chris Rodman is the founder of Rise and Shine, Adventures in Awakening. He's a Nectara guide. He's an integration and preparation coach, and amongst other things, he's also a beautiful father and husband to a wonderful partner here in the Kootenays. Me and Chris first met around, I feel like 2-3 years ago. Chris, we met at a ceremony where I was sitting around a campfire, and this guy came up with his son in his arm and said hi, and I was like, oh, hi, and little did I know that he was kind of vetting me to take care of his son for the night while he was attending a ceremonial space, and spend the night with taking care of his son. And ever since then, we've been developing a deep friendship, and consider him a brother and love him dearly. And he's an awesome person and someone I highly respect, and I'm really thrilled to have him on the podcast. Hi, Chris.
Ah, beautiful. Thanks, Pascal. Great to be
Welcome.
here.
Yeah,
Thank
it's
you.
nice to have you. One of the things that I've always loved about Chris, and also part of his background that makes me respect him even more, is that he's a forest wildfire person. Like, what's the right word for that? I'm not sure, but he has a long history of fighting forest fires, and I just highly respect that work. And I'm interested in weaving that into the conversation today as well, and in terms of how it relates to medicine work and walking a journey of healing.
Nice. Beautiful. Yeah, I've got some sweet analogies that I can riff on with wildfire work.
As the fires burn within us, as they burn without. Uh, so, Chris, one of the things that I always see in you is like a deep walking of the path. Like, you're really someone that's, your life is medicine, and you're dedicated to the path so much, like more so than almost anyone I've ever met. Medicine is weaved into your life. It's weaved into your relationships. It's weaved into your work. It's weaved into your life in a very deep and connected way. Your dedication to the space is unrivaled in a way, in terms of not only to the space and your work, but also as to yourself, in terms of how you're walking life, and how you're looking within to better serve people. And you spent a number of years doing this type of work, and we can go more into kind of the experiences that have led you to this place today. But can you tell us more about Chris as a young boy, and where he came from, and how was your environment, and how was your experience growing up?
Yeah, sure. Well, that was a pretty gracious assessment of my orientation, and thanks for that. Appreciate that experience of me. I was born in Vancouver, first of four, and brought up in North Van. Pretty staunch Catholic upbringing. I went to a Catholic school for grades 5, 6, and 7, and then after that, my folks, thank God, moved to the Kootenays, and spent the rest of my upbringing just outside of Nelson. And yeah, by and large, I have had an extraordinary upbringing. A lot of gratitude for the way I was raised. I couldn't be here now with my current orientation to life if everything hadn't unfolded precisely the way it did. However, as I was getting towards the end of high school, I wasn't necessarily feeling like the direct communion that all of the prayer and all of the dogma, let's say, of the religion was hinting at, and I felt there was something more, and I turned to the internet and turned to science and started looking at the farthest reaches of science. I was looking at quantum mechanics and quantum physics and the law of conservation of energy. Energy is neither created nor destroyed, but changes from one form to another. And that gave me some element of like nature of the soul and what happens after death. I was starting to kind of have questions along those lines. I was reading Michael Crichton, who was a super influential author for me at that time, in particular through his books Jurassic Park and The Lost World. And when I was a kid, actually, dinosaurs were one of my favorite things. I thought I was going to be a paleontologist.
I did too, actually. I did too. I used to dig up fossils and next to my school. I was in love with I loved it. So yeah, that's something new I'm learning from you today.
Oh, sweet. Yeah, thunder lizards, dinosaurs, they're the best. It's so much fun. Yeah, it's a lot of imagination, and it's fantastical to imagine those creatures once having walked on the earth. So Michael Crichton, as we all know, weaves this story, or if you don't know, check out Jurassic Park, read the book. The movies miss a lot of the gold that was in the books. And anyways, the gold for me was the mathematician talked about chaos theory and sensitivity to initial conditions, and the idea that the flapping of a butterfly's wings in Nelson could cause a thunderstorm in New York City, and also talked about order out of chaos and the whole fractal geometry and all those different elements came forth from this idea of chaos theory, and also the principle of self-organization, how there's this inclination for life to self-organize. And then from there also there's the elements of Fibonacci and the golden ratio and all of these just extraordinary facets that make up our existence. I was very much inspired and informed by, and really fed my understanding to my growing understanding, let's say, of the universe and what this is all about. So yeah, went into college and then university. I ended up studying kinesiology. It's an interesting story. I initially started with first year sciences, was thinking I might get into engineering, and was on my way home from school one day, and I picked up this guy hitchhiking, and he had just gotten back from Costa Rica, and man, did he look chill and pretty happy. And I thought, that's what I'm going to do. So I dropped out. It's like, I'm going to Costa Rica.
Wow, that's like the most like poignant hitchhiker changing my life story I've heard so far. Like someone that you've met along the highway or whatever change your life in a huge way. Like I love the stories about this first person that inspired someone to just make that 1 degree shift, or in your case maybe a 10-degree shift towards something that was calling them so beautifully. It's amazing.
It was quite impactful. It definitely planted a seed, but as it turned out, I never made it to Costa Rica after that. I was 17, just finished high school. It could have happened, but I didn't have a lot of the support that I needed to really get it to go. And I ended up taking a job at this place in town, and I was working next to this bodybuilder who went to the gym that I was going to, and we started jamming on supplements and exercises and how to optimize recovery and all these different things. And what I realized in hanging out with him was that if I was going to go to university and study anything, why not study the human body? We've all got one. It'll be with me till the end of time. May as well learn a few things about it. And I had a few other sort of influential pieces in relationship to that happening with me at the gym that I was going to. I was introduced to Paul Chek and the Chek Institute. And so I went on and studied kinesiology. And I also started to do some courses with Paul Chek. The first one was in golf biomechanics. And Paul Chek is this he kind of popularized the Swiss ball, those big round exercise balls that you see everywhere in gyms now. And he also had a profoundly a holistic approach to health, and it was really inspiring for me. And talked a lot about posture and muscle alignment and a lot of really practical elements that I didn't necessarily get while studying a kinesiology degree.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the courses he offered was a holistic lifestyle coaching course, and the instructor for that course was JP Sears,
Oh, wow.
redheaded guy who does the
Yeah.
spiritual satire. Yeah, he's become quite a figure. And JP and I really clicked, and he was mentioning one of his mentors, this man John McMullen, whose webpage is Journeys of Wisdom, and that felt appealing to me. So while at university, they were going to do this semester abroad in China, which it didn't ended up going in that particular year. And I was disappointed, like, I wanted to go do this semester abroad in China, but it didn't fly. So instead, I'm going to go do this workshop with John McMullen. So I go down to San Diego and I meet up with JP, and I ended up staying at his place during this workshop. And at one point in the workshop, John says to me, he goes, you're not 25. I think I was 23 at the time. 38 now, just for the record. And he goes, I think when you're 25, you're going to find love. It's like, oh, all right. Cool. Well, that could mean anything. I'm not going to get excited about, my ideas of what that might mean. But as it turns out, when I was 25, that's when I first met ayahuasca. And it was a particularly unique context, but I'll rewind a little bit and also say that my studies in the sciences and the quantum mechanics and all of that started to weave back into the nature of mind being one of the most influential factors on our health and our experience of life. And I started touching into meditation, and a number of various other sort of esoteric ideas were starting to percolate into my system. And I was working this job, and my employer mentioned the word Vipassana, and that he had gone, and I looked it up, and immediately it was like a hit. I was like, oh my gosh, I must go do this. There's 10-day meditation courses by a donation. You just sit in silence for 10 days. And I went, and it was such a game changer for me. It was one of those extraordinarily pivotal moments of my life. Absolutely. In terms of teaching me what it means to develop awareness and strength of mind, and the recognition of how absolutely monkey-minded and weak-minded I was. And and how people, and that's our general orientation. Why are they not teaching this in schools? Meditation, my goodness, is such an extraordinary gift. Truly profound practice for just being equanimous and centered, and understanding the origins of suffering, not through like some intellectual, this is what the causes of suffering are, but through your own direct experience, like witnessing within the framework of the mind body how suffering is generated, and then the way out of it is just witnessing and having awareness and being present with was what came out of that. And I sat a dozen or so of those courses over the next, from the period of 2008 to, I don't know, 2015 or something like that, somewhere in there.
So you went from a deep kind of religious background upbringing to science and quantum physics, and then you discovered kind of this new channel for you to explore. Like, how was it for you to discover that shift in you, and what changed in you at that time when you were meeting plant medicines or doing your first Vipassanas? Like, what was the kind of largest shift you experienced within your worldview and yourself?
Well, yeah, to be fair, in that sort of high school period, as many of us do in that period, without, the classic rites of passage that used to exist who knows how long ago, I was in a bit of a rebellious mode, and probably fair to say I was kind of a dickhead in a lot of different ways. And uh, I ended up exploring and encountering marijuana, which I used pretty recreationally and probably had a fairly abusive relationship with it in those years. And at the same time, there was some medicine in it, and I had some also initial encounters with mushrooms, and that was broadening the horizons for sure. But it was like a recreational context. There wasn't what I ended up discovering, the ceremonial aspect of how those experiences can be held.
Mm.
And can you reframe that question just one more time so I be clear that I'm speaking to what you just asked?
Well, there's a transition between kind of your lived experience from religion to science to kind of the healing space. Um, and as you were interfacing with these new modalities and new medicines, what was, if any, a shift that occurred to you at that time around your worldview? Like, what was different before and after those experiences that kind of helped shift the future of Chris?
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, I kind of ended up coming full circle in terms of really respecting my roots and the tradition that I was brought up in, and having the capacity to witness, the rays of truth and wisdom that exist in Christianity and in the Catholic faith. And not
Mm-hmm.
only there, but across, a lot of the great traditions of our time. There are nuggets of gold in there, just little pointers, those like fingers pointing at the moons. It's not, the truth isn't contained in the words or in the message, but in, the embodiment of what's being pointed to. And so I kind of came full circle into that and really learned how to respect and honor my upbringing. Yeah.
And what happened after your first ceremony experience with grandmother? Can you walk us through that a little bit?
For sure. So I had been in a Vipassana course a month prior to that first encounter. I was in university, like my last year of university. Managed to get into some upper level psychology classes and was studying psychopharmacology, and had been reading about ayahuasca. And as it turned out, I was doing a paper on the therapeutic benefits of it as a public relations piece. And I was going to university in the Fraser Valley, a fairly conservative zone of the Lower Mainland, let's say. And there was maybe one other alternative kind of cat, let's call him a hippie, that was kicking around campus, and I ended up finding my way to him. And he was talking about DMT, and I'm not sure what variety of DMT he was inviting me to consider partaking of, but I went over to his house and was like, this sounds like something to explore. I've read some of this, and let's take a crack at it. And as it turned out, it didn't it just didn't work. It was sort of like a dead experience, let's say, and thankfully so,
Mm-hmm.
because his partner had a connection to the Santo Daime. And so I ended up sitting with the Santo Daime 2 days. And for those of that you don't know, the Santo Daime is a religious organization that sprung up around the use of ayahuasca out of Brazil. It has these elements of Christianity and Santeria and some of like the tribal, I think, Yawanawa influence. And it was a pretty unique experience. I haven't sat with them again since, and although I'm open and curious to, but they drink during the day, which is somewhat atypical of the general understanding of how ayahuasca works, and so we're sitting there. Men and women are on opposite sides. They call in that tradition ayahuasca the daime, and you come up and you receive it as a sacrament, which I very much hold it as a sacrament. All of the members
Mm-hmm.
of the entheogenic pantheon certainly can be held as sacraments for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So we all drink. There's some hymns. We're sitting there meditating, okay, what's going to happen here? And all of a sudden I hear this.
And you're all on chairs, right? So
Totally.
you're all sitting on like probably slightly uncomfortable chairs during the whole process,
For
right?
sure. Those fold up chairs that, yeah, exactly. And all of a sudden I hear this, boom. I open my eyes and look over, and the fellow just the row up from me is like falling out of his chair and on the floor. People are coming and helping him get back into his seat. And I'm like, oh, that was interesting. Sitting there, okay, what's going to happen? Da, da, da. Meditating. All of a sudden, boom! I look up, the guy right in front of me, douche, falls out of his chair. I was like, holy cow, what's going on here?
And what were you feeling at the time? Like, it was your first experience, like you didn't know what you were going to get into. Like, as always with plant medicine, the first time you try something, there's like a lot of nervousness and anxiety. And like, what were you feeling, and how did you interface with that feeling of drinking for the first time?
Yeah, well, I brought the meditation practice into it, and I'll probably speak a little bit more on that later around how much I think that's a valuable thing to at least get anchored into to some extent. A meditation practice, if you can sink that in. Well, I'm speaking to it now. If you can sink that in before you come to your explorations of entheogens, psychedelics, that would be useful. It'll serve you immensely. So, I think I didn't have, as I recall, the medicine took a while to come on. And I do remember a few distinct pieces over those 2 days. One was, I was sitting there were some visionary elements starting to unfold. But what I realized was that I couldn't recall when I had last taken a breath. And it was like I had stopped breathing, and there was nothing wrong with that. And yeah, it was very, very centered. It was just a unique flavor of the experience. Not necessarily what this is all about, but that's what I recall of that. And then on the second day, the padrino stacked yopo into the ayahuasca portion of the work. And I don't think I really knew what yopo was, but for those that don't, it's a snuff, and it's blown up through a pipe into the nostrils, and it also has DMT in it, and the spirit of its own. And when that happened, I ended up going for this opportunity, and it was in that moment where I had this beautiful presence of the spirit show up and say hi. And it was very invitational, and very clear. And it was at that point that I knew I was going to be going to South America. And so I finished university. And while I was going to university, you mentioned the wildfire work. I became a wildfire crew leader, really sank my teeth into the industry at the level of a contractor. I worked with a contract company for the majority of my career. And so we had a good wildfire season. In those days, lightning bolts were like dollar signs in my eyes.
Why did you first start working as a wildfire person? Like, what was the kind of intention behind that? Was it like protecting the environment? Was it like the physicality of it? Like, what drove you to that?
Yeah, I've got an affinity to adventure. And I've always been drawn to the natural forces of the earth. Earthquakes, volcanoes, avalanches, tsunamis, wild weather, tornadoes, all those like immensely powerful elements I've been fascinated by. And so signing up for wildfire suppression is what they call it. And suppression is what it is. And as I journeyed down the path of the wildfire industry, I learned a lot of things about that. And so in a sense, in the beginning, it was about the proximity to that wildfire.
Yeah, and what was the fire that was burning within you to guide you to South America? What was the burning desire underneath all that?
Yeah. I think just the fires of truth. I think, a real sincere desire to understand who I am, to pursue healing, to come out of suffering. Yeah, to grow and learn and get into the depths about what the nature of reality is. Yeah, I have real curiosity about that. There's more to all of this than meets the eye. And these medicines, these plant teachers, are pretty adept at helping to guide our awareness into the more subtle nuances of what it means to be alive in this miraculous existence.
And was there a kind of a zeal or dissatisfaction in your life that you were looking to illuminate or deepen your understanding of how you can best support yourself? Was there something around that as well, or we are purely driven by the sense of the elements and the adventures?
Well, I think there was some recognition of my own wounding, of my own sort of limited beliefs, and a desire to move beyond that, seek a greater harmony with life. There was I think, a novelty in it, a real sort of pioneering, fringish element that was, this is unique and totally out of the ordinary. And also it was something that was facilitating that continued sense of wanting to connect and commune with this higher purpose, with divinity, and to come into relationship with that. I think ultimately there was a spirit of guidance. All of the different threads and pieces that have availed themselves to me in my life, starting with Jurassic Park almost, and maybe earlier, with my whole upbringing, let's say, the parents that I chose for this incarnation helped to shape my orientation as well, including all of the wounding that we all experience in our upbringing. So just curious to get to the core, and yeah,
Live an extraordinary life.
pretty much.
And so you've got this Vipassana experience, you've got a little bit of medicine experience, you feel the call to go to South America. What happens next?
Right. So that wicked wildfire season that I was alluding to funded my first trip to South America, and so grateful for some of my friends here. As unbeknownst to me, there was already a community, a thread of the medicine present in Nelson, cat's out of the bag. And this friend said, you should check out Diego Palma. He's in the Sacred Valley, And so I looked up the Sacred Valley tribe and got onto the website, and Diego was posting videos on different things. And he posted this video on how he had just sat a Vipassana course, and then his experience with the medicine and how extraordinary that was. And I thought, wow, this guy is weaving these two things together. Amazing. I've kind of already done that. And this is somebody I want to check out. And, after those experiences, I was, that first experience, let's say, and with the intention of going to South America, my intention to go to South America and pursue all of this was pretty zealous, and I was recklessly keen. I knew very little about what it was that I was getting into.
And that's very common of a lot of people that enter the psychedelic space, that zeal of, I need this right now, I need to do this. And so how that recklessness can lead to beautiful things, it also can lead to some darker places. And we can talk about that a little bit later around like vetting retreats and guides and all that stuff. And what did you learn something from that zealousness at first? Like what, going to South America to, I guess, did you meet Diego Palma and you sat with him or?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's some danger in the zeal, but with the right guidance. And I mean, I think ultimately for me, and this isn't the case for everybody, but I was pretty well resourced in myself, in trusting my capacity to, travel to a foreign place. I started the trip in Ecuador. Yeah, I'll leave the educational piece around what not to do for a little bit later. But started the trip in Ecuador. Yeah, I went immediately to the jungle. Actually, I went straight to the jungle, and well, let's just dive into it since it's alive right now. I went straight to the jungle with these friends who were exploring a cacao plantation with some of the indigenous folks in that area, and I ended up asking the guy that we were going down there with, because he was talking about all the different plants in the jungle and showing us these different things. And I was like, hey, do you know how to make ayahuasca? He's like, oh, ayahuasca, like Star Wars. So I was like, yeah.
Star Wars?
Yeah, Guerreros de los Galácticos. And his grandfather, I think, was maybe a medicine man or had some more association with it. He knew about the plant, but didn't really know what it entailed working with it in a ceremonious way. So he went ahead and prepared this for me, because here I am, this tourist, I guess, or who knows what, just asking for this thing and this experience, and pretty ignorant. And he prepares this stuff and then serves it to us just as night's coming on, unceremoniously, and with like a shot of hard liquor to chase it down.
Oh my goodness.
It's like, all right, and went for it. And everyone else kind of had hit the sack somehow, and I'm out there in the jungle, like meditating, like, okay, yeah, this is it. I'm in the jungle. This is happening. Right on. Woo, and then nothing was really happening. I was like, okay, all right, well, interesting. So I hadn't set myself up a place to sleep. Outside of these huts, there was a hammock, and I was like, all right, I'll just crash in here. And I woke up partway through the night feeling horrific. I was getting worked, just destroyed. And it was a rough experience. And in some senses kind of felt like, I mean, part of it was just the misguided element and the misguided approach, and sometimes the experience is just like that in the best of ceremonial contexts. But anyhow, I think there was a lesson learned there, which I still didn't put together until later, because I still wasn't quite grasping the significance of what the ceremonial context provides. So I made it out of Ecuador. I climbed Chimborazo. I did some surfing, realized I wanted to get a motorcycle, found one in Buenos Aires, bought a KLR 650, glorious bike. Got it from this awesome guy, Alex Chacon is his name. And we rode together on this bike to Iguazu Falls. We had some adventures. We were following in the trails of Che Guevara, more or less. These two guys, this motorcycle. We had to ride together for 5 days for a few reasons. Part of it was the paperwork. Part of it was like, I didn't want to leave Buenos Aires on a bike, because I'd only really ridden a motorcycle like a couple times prior to that. And so we had a good time. And I often joke, my revolution was the inner revolution, the revolution I was pursuing. But anyhow, made my way out of Argentina and across the continent. My goodness, it was absolutely glorious. and motorcycle travel will be a part of future retreat offerings. Just planting that seed. It's coming.
Mm-hmm.
But I ended up in the Sacred Valley, and I sought out Diego Palma, and we met, and I sat with him, and things started to really crystallize as far as what ceremony is about, and how it's held, and how the medicine works. And my inspiration just continued to grow. And I think I sat about a dozen or so times over the course of the month that I spent in the Sacred Valley, and worked with Diego and a few different facilitators that were under his wing, and encountered some Shipipo maestros as well, and had some varied experiences in terms of the medicine work and how it's offered. And went through a lot of transformation. It was a pretty catalyzed time of growth, and was also, I think, the Saturn return. I was 27, so there was some significance there in terms of the timing of all of this. And the last circle that I sat before I left was with a facilitator by the name of Herman Virguez. He lives in Mexico now, and we'll be organizing a retreat with him in November. And it was a daytime experience, and I went into a pretty significantly cathartic process. And while he was like working at attempting to get me kind of grounded and in my center, and facilitating the getting through that process, he sang this song. And as he was singing, all of a sudden my voice just went boop, and we started singing together. And I was in such a surrendered state. It was such a beautiful gift. It was another one of those pivotal moments in my relationship to this work, where I realized,
Did that open your voice? Yeah, did that open your voice from that moment?
it basically said, this is a gift for you to cultivate and grow. And I never realized it was there. It may have pre-existed that experience, but in this state, it was very much it was a pretty clear calling to the work from the get-go, and that's not the case for everybody. And but I knew it was going to be a significant part of my life. In fact, after the first couple ceremonies, I went to Diego and I was like, "Do you take on apprentices?" And he goes, "Well, can you sing? Do you play any instruments?" And I remember feeling a little bit dejected, and was like, "No, like not really. Like, what does that have to do with anything?" and it became clear. And then in that final ceremony before I left, it became really clear. And not long after that, I picked up a guitar, and was delighted to discover there was a bridge between the Sacred Valley and Nelson. I was able to continue growing the relationship and doing the work. And
And what did you learn about ceremony in that time? Because you sat with Santo Daime, and then you sat with this guy who would give you whiskey with ayahuasca. And then you landed in this place called the Sacred Valley, aptly named, and you perhaps for the first time really sat in a series of ceremonies that really connected you with the meaning and the contextual power that ceremony has. What did you learn about ceremony at that time?
Well, that it's a window of opportunity for an experience that interweaves between three different phases. Friend and dear mentor on the path kind of highlighted this aspect of it, that sometimes you're in the hospital, sometimes you're in university, and sometimes you're in church, and sometimes it's kind of a mix of all three at the same time. And but the ultimate essence of it is that partaking of these sacraments, these medicines, these teachers, the demarcating a beginning to this is what we are entering into, and then going through that experience, and then similarly demarcating the close, like that work has been completed for this point in time. Now go forth and integrate, or weave the gems of insight and healing and learning into your life, and grow that. Yeah, so the ceremonial element of having a clear beginning, a clear ending, and then the orchestration of the process in a group field. What I learned also is that there is very much a group field, and that everyone sitting in the circle, holding space for each other, going through the experience together, the connections, the to witness each other in that way, to hold space in that way. And you're not really necessarily witnessing someone directly because you're all in the dark typically. It's deep teachings about the interconnectivity of everything, and beyond even the teaching, but just the direct experience of that interconnectivity comes from the ceremonial experience. Learning aspects of one's, what has influenced my behavior over the years, and the beliefs that have given shape to my behavior, and how those deep beliefs were adopted, and how that can be let go. Surrender is a big theme of ceremonial experience. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. And what did you learn about the cultural context while you were there? Those are probably new practices, new ways of seeing the world, new practices, and new language as well around medicine work and ceremony. Like, what are some of the key things that you experienced at first that were that enrich your path and maybe have stayed with you since then?
Yeah, great question. Well, I am profoundly grateful that I came into the medicine work through Diego Palma and the Sacred Valley tribe. The flavor of how those ceremonies were shaped and are shaped is beginning very much in an indigenous thread, and acknowledging the tribes and the cultures of the Amazon, and the people of the Andes, was very much like the foundational beginning place, and the medicine would kind of be called in through the Icaros, the songs of the plants. But then what would happen is, mantras and sacred phrases from different traditions across the globe would end up getting woven into the ceremonial space, and the power of mantra that I experienced was extraordinary. It was really, really beautiful. So there's that, there was a cross-cultural element in there, kind of this globalized, universal connection that got created in those particular ceremonies. And then sitting with the Shipipos was also really very tribal, very unique way of connecting with the medicine. And there's, I think, 70 different indigenous cultures across the whole Amazon basin that work with these plants. And there's a unique way in which it's held through each of them. And then even within a particular culture, let's say, ultimately the way that it's being facilitated is shaped through the uniqueness of every person. And then even with that one singular person, every ceremony that you may sit with that person also is like a unique experience. It's always like, what's the spirit going to call forth in this one? And what does it relate to? So many influential elements, the position of the stars and the planets. And, it's just always a new experience.
That's very true. And from that experience with the Sacred Valley people, your motorcycle journey continued, or was that kind of the end of it? And you stayed
Yeah.
there for a month or so, right? Like, and that was a pretty long trip from Argentina to there. And what
After
happened
that,
after
I
that?
carried my way back to Ecuador. I got fairly connected into this little town of Vilcabamba, and I was interwoven into a couple of romances, and and so that kind of was driving me back to Ecuador, and yeah, so I made my way back to Ecuador and danced into a few varying experiences there, and then yeah, it was 5 months in total that I was down there. I think it was 8,000 miles across the whole continent, and it was a good
That's
time.
quite the adventure. And what changed in you after that journey through South America? Like, was that a pivotal moment where you can? I mean, I'm sure it was because of the number of deep experiences you had, but what changed in you? Did you come back to Nelson a different man completely? What would you determine as the kind of key points that
Well, I
changed?
had a beard. I had a beard like
The big
this
question.
big, and my hair was like growing out all along, and I was a little wild. I was footloose, fancy free, um, keen. It was like university had just started. I just finished university, but it was like, whoa, my studies are just getting kicked off here, and yeah, continued wildfire work, and that was ongoing tuition for my facilitating my growing connection with the medicine. Um, Shortly after I got back, I met Lindsay in the ceremonial context, my life partner, and so that premonition of John McMullen's around finding love was pretty accurate um, in the way that it manifested. Yeah,
Amazing.
for sure.
So which one came first, his prediction or that happening? Maybe he could see in the future a little bit.
He's a profoundly intuitive individual. Highly recommend checking him out for coaching. Um, that came first. That was around the time where I met JP Sears. It was in my sort of middle university years. It was before the medicine. So when he said at the age of 25, you're going to find love, I was 25 when I encountered ayahuasca with the Santo Daime. And I can only attribute what he was referring to that. Is it true? I don't know. Sounds good.
But it speaks to the power of words too, like the power of words to create change in the world. And John was a teacher to you very early on, and Diego Palma was another one, and other people from the Sacred Valley tribe. Has there been other teachers along the way that either said something that unknown to you at the time would change your path, or maybe there's teachers that you've been ongoingly working with or connecting with, or what are some other key teachers, and what did it teach you along the way?
My brother Jara has he gave me some pretty strong counsel around taking one's time, and just in terms of readiness and embracing the huge responsibility of medicine work as a facilitator. Um,
That's a really important one too, like especially as the emergence of psychedelics is coming to higher energies. There's a lot of people that serve medicine with very little experience, and that's with yourself and some others I've seen in the space. That dedication to time and patience, to me, is like what leads to the sweetest fruits and the highest integrity in the way that you interface with the spaces. Can you speak a little bit about that?
yeah, I was profoundly grateful for that I almost call it tough love, and that encouragement to really slow it down. And I've since developed actually a wildfire analogy where, when I first got into the wildfire industry, I was like, had this whole romanticized ideal of what it was to go fight a forest fire. It's like, yeah, it's going to be like this, and there's going to be Pulaskis and fire and a helicopter and da 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 da. And, to some extent, it was all those things. And there's a lot more to it. And as I grew on that path and progressed, went from firefighter to crew leader to, I held a lot of different positions, became a tree faller, was put in the role of incident command on various fires, managed at one point in Alberta a 15,000 hectare fire, multiple crews, helicopters, bucket ships, all the jazz. It was an extraordinary amount of responsibility that at first was really daunting. In the end, I enjoyed it quite a bit. It was a great opportunity. And coming into that leadership and going down the road and developing the experience, then seeing these young guys come onto my crews all like with the romanticized ideal of what a wildfire is, and like, okay guys, hold on, just slow down. Like, well, it's gonna be like this when it's like this, but when it's not like this, it's actually a lot like this. And and sort of like not wanting to completely flatten the enthusiasm, but just painting a little more of a reality around what the situation is. And so to just weave that back into the plant medicine work, I think there was a point in time where I had a very romanticized ideal of what it meant to facilitate these experiences. And, some of the wisdom that I received was, I almost wouldn't wish this work on anybody. Like, it's a tremendous amount of work and responsibility. And over the years after receiving that guidance, it started to really like click for me. And it's like, at the end of the day, always, no matter what, focusing on my own work. And as that takes me into the different places, then things unfold like facilitation, which is happening. But with the recognition now of a growing recognition, let's say, an ever deepening recognition of what it is that's really being entered into here. And so that's been useful. Another piece from my current teacher, who I go on dieta with, in the mestizo sort of lineage of Don Salonteo, Doña Cristina, Don Jose Campos. We're going down to Campos Jose's place. He was talking about being in the medicine at one point, and he was working with Lupuna. Lupuna is this giant tree, beautiful plant teacher. And he was getting some insights and some teachings, and he goes, "Is this the voice of Lupuna?" And the answer he got back was, "We all speak from the same voice." And that resonated really deeply with me, and I think is something to bring into consideration when we are talking about all the different plant teachers and the qualities of their spirit, to recognize the underlying source intelligence that is the unified essence of all, speaking through these various emissaries of that source, let's say. And they show up quite beautifully in the plant world. And then the plant world teaches us that voice is, the speaking to us continuously in every moment, and then allows us to kind of sink in and develop the capacity to be able to hear and channel and express divine will.
Yeah, that's a beautiful segment into talking about a different type of teacher, the plant teachers. I know your experience with obviously ayahuasca and plant medicines. You've also done multiple dietas with different plants, and you've gone to the jungle many times to do these. I love hearing about your quests when you come back home, and I'm like, can't wait to say, "Hey, Chris, how was your journey into the jungle?" Because the way you've interfaced with these teachers is should deep dedication to going back to the basics and really connecting with the elements, connecting with the teachers, connecting with yourself, connecting with your senses, connecting with the elements of the earth. And you talked about, as a growing man, really being excited by the adventures and the elements, and you still are, but that kind of motivation to interface with those things, like, is still very present in you. And you've experienced a lot of those things in the last years through these jungle dietas that you could. I would love if you could walk us through how those adventures unfold for you, and how was it for you to go through them, and which plant teachers were present along your journey as well when you went there. And even in Nelson, you still interface with the plant teachers. I'd love to learn more about that part of your journey.
Well, I guess it was 7 years ago. I decided to embark upon my first dieta, and through the Sacred Valley tribe, there was often reference made to Don Jose Campos. I kept hearing this name, and so I looked him up and saw that he was hosting dietas. Found my way into one, and we started off our trip in Bali, Lindsay and I. She was taking a course to become a doula, and also did her first panchakarma. It's like a intensive Ayurvedic cleanse. And we had a beautiful time in Bali. And then I left a little bit early to start this dieta, and landed in Pucallpa to go on this 6-hour journey to get to the camp. And it's really a camp. It's totally off-grid, no electricity. You're given a little tambo, this little screened-in hut with a hammock and a bed and a desk, and then it's strung out along this trail that runs along this beautiful little river called Renkia. And then there's the Maloka, the ceremonial space in the middle of it all, and all the different plants are growing all around. And the washroom is like a little commode in the middle of the jungle just behind your tambo. It's just like a pit in the ground, basically. And you're getting your food brought to you daily, and the food and dieta is pretty simple. It's like beans and rice. The odd, you get this river fish that only eats plants, boca chico, delicious but very bony. So it's like you're giving up a lot of your typical comforts to really sink in and have this experience of immersion, and increase, the taking away all the distractions and the flavors of food, and the salt is helps to increase your sensitivity and your ability to connect with the plants. My first diet was with bobinsana and a plant called pukupanga, and it was a very profound experience. In one of the ceremonies, I had this extraordinary vision of a child gestating in the womb. And it felt like I was able to, witness the way our genetics interweave as we incarnate, from our mother and our father, and then the breath of life, the quality of spirit and soul that infuses that. And there was this really unique quality of timelessness. It was like when we are gestating in the womb, time passes by way more slowly, which makes sense because I think we all have the experience as we age that time appears to be accelerating. And I think my theories on that are that there's some element of that's just the biological aging process, but maybe there's something on a more grand universal scale around time accelerating, and two of those things happening. Anyways, but there's some time ultimately is kind of an illusion. So, and the way we experience it, I think, is reflective of our various stages of life. So this was beautiful. and I kind of felt like I was being just shown how we incarnate. And I ended up becoming really good friends with this woman that I met in that dieta, and she's been on every single dieta that I've sat since. And at that time, we were talking about our lives, and I was talking about Lindsay and our lives together, and something about children. And she goes, and she's a bit of a sage. She goes, I think you're going to be a father sooner than you think. And I was like, well, I'm sure it's coming down the line. Little did I know, after I left that dieta, Lindsay joined me in the Sacred Valley. I went back to the Sacred Valley, and after 2 weeks of time together down there, exploring various adventures like Asangate and then lining ourselves up for a retreat in the northern part of the country, we discovered that she was pregnant. And as it turned out, that vision, and I feel relatively certain about this, was actually an experience of what was happening for her in real time, and for our son. So
Wow.
the visionary insights that can come through this work are extraordinary, and we don't always put it together, what it is at the time. And sometimes also, it's often to be taken with a grain of salt, what it is that comes to us. And it takes time to really integrate what that means and what the timeline is around how and when it's going to unfold, or even if it will. It's often best to hold these things lightly in terms of how you think they may pan out, or what it means.
Discernment is a new word I learned along my path, is to discern the things that you receive, and use your best judgment and intuition. And like you said earlier, patience. I think time tells everything usually. And time is a great teacher. And so you did your first Bomansana dieta. And what year was that?
That must have been like 2015. Yeah.
Okay, and you've since gone back to the jungle multiple times, and at some point you ended up in China as well. You talked about that
Oh yeah,
yesterday.
sure
I'd
thing.
love to
Yeah,
hear
so
your China story.
I just sat my sixth dieta this last June. I'll be going back in October. I'm sinking into a rhythm of twice a year, and I love it down there. Holy smokes! I shed tears the first time I left the jungle. Actually, it is such a
Well, let's
yeah.
talk about that a bit before going to China. Is what do you love about the experience? What do you love about the place and the culture and the practices? And because it's not easy, it's not like physically or emotionally, I would imagine. You're against the elements. There's like bugs everywhere. Like the food is like not what you're used to. You're living in a very closed, kind of isolated place, full of life around you. But at the same time, you're like living this raw, visceral, wild, exciting, primal experience in the jungle. Is it, I'd venture a guess that for you, like one of the things you love about it is like that what you talked about, which was understanding the essence of things, and being in that space probably allows you to open up to that essence a lot easier or in a more direct way. Is that
Yeah,
kind of
it's
a
very
thread
much
for you?
back to basics. Um, in in Vipassana, what you're doing is observing yourself, self-observation, and observing purely the mind-body phenomenon as it is, not as you would like it to be, let's say. And what ends up happening is you are witnessing the laws of nature as they are unfolding and playing out within yourself. The mechanisms that beat my heart and digest my food are unfolding via the same impulse that is growing the trees and creating the rain and birthing suns. And so when you immerse yourself into the purity of nature and into the depths of that, not only in a meditative way are you, if that's a practice that you're bringing to it, having that inner place very available to you, it's being reflected to you directly wherever you look, through the butterflies and the plants and the insects and all the animals and the wildness and the just the intense vitality and cycles of birth and death happening left, right, and center in a whole myriad of different ways. When I first went, it's like, I'm going to the jungle. It's going to be wild. And, the fears of all the different little things that are going to maybe get you or who knows what. And I remember the first night walking into my tombo, there's this massive insect on the wall. I was like, man, I'm not going to sleep with this bug in here. And so I took out my little plastic garbage can and knocked it into the thing and put it out the door, came back in, turned on the light, and by which I mean candle, because there were no lights. And there was another one on the wall again. And it was in that moment I was like, okay, surrender, just okay. And yeah, for sure.
Om Shanti.
And there was this moment of, it just felt like an acceptance where there's that surrender, but it feels like the jungle accepted me to some extent. And there's a real living relationship there now with the spirit of nature in all places, but really there's a living relationship there that is so welcoming. And I mean, I view the place now, I feel so at home there. It went from this foreign, wild, dangerous place to being somewhere where I feel very much at home. There's more to be said about that. I think ultimately it's coming home to one's true nature, getting into the core essence of who you really are, entails also being able to be curious around how you can discover yourself in everything that appears around you, in the people and the environment. This is there's an aspect of my true nature in all of that. And it's an interesting thing to open up to. And when I say these, it's so important to not just take my word for it and, be with yourself in your own journey of unfolding this truth of unity.
Exactly. Yes. Well said. Going back to your first experience and what you've learned since then, walking the journey and these medicine adventures you've been on and the multiple dietas you've been into and the jungle trips and all that stuff. There's a big emergence of the psychedelic space these days. Things are accelerating, expanding. There's multiple different kind of types of players coming in and lots of money is being poured into the space. And you've had your own personal experiences in a very direct way with different facilitators and practitioners and coaches and different containers. What could you share around your experience regarding vetting facilitators? It's a question we get a lot at Nectara, is how should I vet my guide or practitioner? And we've all heard the stories of physical abuse and unexperienced guides or people that flip out on their own ceremony. I've heard stories of facilitators actually flipping out in their own ceremonies. How do you see what makes a good facilitator and what makes a poor one, and how can someone navigate that space when they're starting out or they don't quite have the referral network that some people that have more experience have? What would you advise to people to look for and and ways to navigate the space, which can be very daunting at first.
Yeah. Well, I would say definitely take your time, and also to not just take anybody's word for it. You'll have your trusted sources. So for me, when I landed in Ecuador and ended up in this small town of Vilcabamba and was connecting with lots of alternatively minded folks, and this one fellow who had a beard and a man bun and some cool looking clothing was raving about his shaman, and that he was in Cusco and da 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 da. And I was like, oh, well, I'll be going through there at some point. So I made a note of this. I was like, this guy sounds awesome. And so I got the bike, whole trip, ended up landing in Cusco. This is before I got into the Sacred Valley. I was so keen. It was just like, boom, first thing. All right, this guy. And go to his place, and he's got all these different artifacts and stuff. And I was like, okay, I'm looking for this experience. And okay, great. So I follow him in this car on my bike to his house in the hills of Cusco. And he served me wachuma. Thankfully, it was wachuma. And did this like weird little opening and had me dance this funny little thing, and then sat me down outside in his yard with a tent and a chair, and he basically went inside and was watching television. That's what was going on. And I was like, all right, well, whatever. And again, I'm outside, like sitting and meditating and like blah, blah, blah. And must not have been very good wachuma. I don't remember experiencing anything that whole night other than his little white puppy that kept coming and grabbing my pant leg and like pulling on it. It's just cute little white puppy. And it's like, this feels a little off. This feels like, I feel like I kind of just got scammed, actually. I'm pretty sure I've been scammed. This is, what the hell did I just get myself into? And so I survived that experience and later came to learn, tragically, that a participant died in the hands of this character in an ayahuasca ceremony in the jungle. And the guy took this dude and buried him and tried to hide it, and then he got uncovered and found, and it was just horrific. Not a good example of So if I had vetted him a little more diligently, we might have had a conversation, which would have been difficult because my Spanish wasn't very good. So that's one thing, is, sometimes language barrier is a piece depending on the country that you're going to. So make sure you are able to get some clear questions asked, which would include, how's this going to work? What's the dosage? What's your level of experience? Where are you going to be? Are you partaking? I got a friend, particularly in the ayahuasca world, don't drink with anybody who's not also partaking of the medicine. And that's that whole context of how that medicine is held. Yeah, I'm grateful I made it through that. And I made it through my zealous period. So just recognize that you might have some zeal, and it can lead you down some, you can be misguided through that. Grateful for all the wisdom I have today and those experiences that I can share with others, so that they don't make the same mistakes I did. For sure.
And not settling for the first facilitator as well. Yeah, it's good to work with different ones and experience different perspectives, and expand your awareness of what makes a good container, what makes a poor one as well. I think through personal experience, we can a lot. Of course, you can't avoid every poor experience, but they do show you kind of the way forward as well in terms of finding the good ones in the future. And what has been your experience of that? Like, have you mostly been privileged enough to work with good facilitators, except for this Guy who buries
Um,
bodies somewhere in the river.
yeah,
That's a pretty dark. That's the darkest one I've heard yet, and there's a lot of
you
dark
can.
ones out there too as well. But what has been your experience with different facilitators, and then relatively speaking, like what has that taught you around holding a good container? What
Yeah.
does it mean to
Well,
hold
I mean,
people
and you can look
safely?
up that particular story. His name is Mankaluto, and there's lots of stories out there on the internet. And not to, uh, I don't want to get on a high horse. That fellow is a human being like the rest of us, and compassion for him and that experience and his way of orienting, and hopefully, he's learned some big lessons from that. And I guess, yeah, on the note of, yeah, for me, I feel really, really grateful that I've explored the field and called in a variety of different experiences. I think that is an important thing to do. An analogy I like to bring in with the plant medicine world is that it's like massage therapy. There's shiatsu and lomi lomi and craniosacral and acupuncture and all these different forms of body work. And then even within, let's say, acupuncture, there's all these different therapists who all practice in their own way. And sometimes it's good to have a variety of those things woven together as they work in a complementary and holistic way to generate the greatest healing. And sometimes too, you'll find something that works better for you than something else, and it's unique entirely to you. So, for some people, it's the daime is their
Mm-hmm.
thing, and for others, it's strict shipipo or yawanawa or blah 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 or da da da. It's a huge world, and it can be valuable to just explore a little bit in the beginning and find the thing that works for you. And by the same token, when you find the thing that works for you, it's good to sink into that. Another one of the teachings from Goenka is, and he says the same thing, like explore various modalities of meditation, different retreats of this nature, of that nature, but at some point, settle into one, because what you're doing is it's like going around trying to dig a well to get to the water, and you dig a little bit here, and you're like, I'm going to not dig here. I'm going to go dig over a little bit here, and you go dig over there a little bit, and you never really get down to the depth and sink in to the source of the water through whatever particular modality. So it's valuable to explore the field, and it's also, through that you will get funneled into the thing that is your medicine, that works for you uniquely. That's my opinion.
Yeah, that's beautiful, and it's been my own experience as well. As I've explored my own path and different modalities and spaces and containers, like just through the harmonic resonance I feel in each one, and I can better gauge like what aligns with my system, because when it's working well for me, like it just feels fluid, it just feels like there's smooth, there's no sandpaper anywhere like in my body or in my field. Like I feel like it's just aligned, and I feel like I can become like almost one with the environment. That's harmonic resonance to me. It's like even with friends and people and different medicines, like when I feel that, I know that it's true for me. And you're right, there's multiple different perspectives on those things. And I'm curious too around like as you've navigated many plant medicine experiences and deep journeys, what could you say about setting up a foundation for navigating the experience, like before you enter those experiences? We often talk about the experience itself, and increasingly so in Nectara, it's part of our focus is integration, but preparation is also integration. What is kind of your personal guidelines on how you approach the journey, how you prepare for these jungle trips and these deep
Well,
dietas?
I've often said that entheogens are like catalysts for the meditative process. And if one had no experience of meditation before encountering entheogens, the experience often brings you into the space of presence. They kind of demand that you come into the present, and they teach you meditation in a sense. However, if you can equip yourself with a solid meditation practice, and whatever that might be for you, then you're doing yourself a big favor, and in being able to navigate the experience with equanimity, let's say, balance of mind, being able to stay in your center in the midst of all the intensity that can and does unfold in these experiences. So meditation, absolutely, which involves, aspects of presence with the breath, and intimacy with the breath and body, mind. Nutrition is a huge component. The more clear and clean and wholesome you can make your diet as you approach these experiences, that'll set you up well. I think there's an element of physical fitness that is absolutely useful in terms of like the endurance and having the energetic reserves to meet the fullness of the experience. I wouldn't say it's a prerequisite, but like if we're talking about how to absolutely maximize things, sink into your yoga practice or whatever flavor of fitness or exercise or being out in nature, just steeping in the elements is a useful way of prepping yourself for which you will ultimately be immersed in. Being well rested, removing distractions, getting clear on your intention. Why you approach this experience. It's not for everybody. That's definitely. I'm beyond that degree of evangelism and zeal about it. This is not. It's not for everybody, but if it is calling you, then wonderful.
And it's not a silver bullet either. It takes a whole array of different support systems and different perspectives and teachings and modalities and practices and lived experience to really kind of fully integrate the flashes of illumination into everyday life. And speaking of not for everybody, you work with and have on a personal level worked with 5-MeO-DMT, which is called the God molecule, and is often known as the most powerful psychedelic in the world. When I first took 5-MeO, I was probably the most scared I've ever been in my life before the experience. I was, someone told me like, you need to be ready to die before you take 5-MeO. And I was in that mindset of like, it was a powerful inquiry for me to explore that. Like, am I ready to let go of myself and my construct? And that was a really deep exploration for me to just even prepare for that experience and really sink in that question of like, am I ready to let go and detach myself from my ego? That was a powerful, even before the experience, that was a powerful time for me. And it turned out to be a blissful experience of just complete surrender and bliss. But it was also extremely powerful. I'm curious, like how did you start to work with this powerful medicine, and what can you say around, integrating 5-MeO-DMT and preparing for it?
Yeah. I'm so grateful that particular sacrament has come into my life. It was on my radar in the early years, and I knew at some point there would be a re-encounter there. For me, it's like jumping into a cold lake. You know it's going to be shocking, and yet you pretty much always come out feeling refreshed. And it's given me that opportunity to experience the ultimate surrender. Yeah, there's that death piece. There's an element of initiation in it. I like to offer it as a rites of passage tool. In a sense, you know, the experience is ineffable. There are not words to describe what unfolds, but the pointers of words that I will use goes along these lines. It's like taking a bath in yourself and dissolving into pure being. It's like that samadhi, that awakened to this is who I am, and I am in the essence of all things, and that existence just simply is infinite, forever paradise. Ocean of just pure being in the essence of all things. Huacha. Yeah. And just the coming into the one's just the oneness that is undeniable. And then the irony is that as it wears off and you start to coalesce back into the form of mind-body phenomena with all of its conditioning and patterns and genetics, it's like you can witness the forgetting. Something remains for sure. You are indelibly marked with the experience of the eternal, but it's like there's an element of the cosmic joke in it where we forget so we can go on to this hero's journey of remembering. And it's also perfect. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. How do you integrate that into your everyday life? When I came out of my first experiences with 5-MeO, I had the same experience of coming back into the story and coming back into the conditioning and all that stuff. And I remember very visibly, like feeling like I could feel it coming in. I could feel the gap kind of closing in between the two worlds. And what remained is very core essence in myself that remains as a core essence of myself that brings me joy every day. Like I can trace my life before and after the 5-MeO experience, which actually you were present for, which I'm really grateful you witnessed that transition for me. Is that that bliss, that center of unity, that center of oneness has remained with me at the core of like everything that I do. And I could feel joy for the very first time in a very felt, deep, authentic way. And that's remained with me for 2 or 3 years now. And I'm curious how you've integrated those insights, because it can feel quite cosmic. They can feel quite abstract or subtle sometimes, or very powerful in some other ways. But how has that changed your everyday life? Like, how does it change your relationships or your relationship to your family, your work, your friends, how you see the world? Like, do you get less caught up in the drama, or like you still get caught in the ego? And is it less than before? And I'm curious, like, what your experience of integrating those experiences.
I'd love to touch on that.
Yeah.
Integrating 5-MeO. Yeah. Great question. It's probably one of the more difficult experiences to integrate. I mean, the trick is to maintain that sense of reverence and awe for the sacred truth of the miracle of existence and your inseparable part in that, and the perfection in everything. And again, it's like this experience is not a magic bullet. It's unlocking a process of further work of like, I see this paradise. How do I live my life in a way that moves towards and accentuates and contributes and operates from a place of knowing that we are in the grand orchestra here, and how can I play my song in a way that is going to contribute to the harmony of the whole, as the whole. Is something like that.
That's beautiful. That's beautifully put. Beautiful. Where can people find you these days? What's coming up for you? Like any plans for this year?
Well, I did a
projects you're
microdosing
working on that you'd like to share
mastermind
to
with
people?
Laura Dawn last summer, and it was a wonderful experience. And she recently launched something called Grow Medicine, and I felt inspired to contribute to that. When I was last in the jungle, I brought back this phenomenal piece of visionary artwork by a man named Alfredo. He was a student of Pablo Amaringo's, and I'm going to do a fundraiser of that painting. Would be first prize. Second prize would be a seat on a retreat with Adventures in Awakening, which is a part of an offering that I'm curating. My practice, my business, I'm calling it Rise and Shine. Rise and Shine is time to wake up, is wake up time. And second prize, some elements of coaching. Mm-hmm. So I'm working as a soul coach, prep and integration coach, for those seeking to kind of get connected to the purpose, find fulfillment, move beyond limiting beliefs that may be creating anxiety, depression, lack of connection to life, that kind of a thing. So through a lot of inquiry, we will unfold those elements and line you up with the harmony of your truth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so Rise and Shine Now. It's my website. Feel free to check it out. Grateful to be a guide on Nectara. It can be found in the community there. Please, yeah, reach out. Happy to have a connection, and curious to hear what folks are up to.
Mm-hmm. And I'll also say that Chris hosts monthly integration circles with his beloved wife, Lindsay. And that as I've developed my friendship and understanding of who Chris is and how he operates in the world, I can say it's a privilege and an honor to be able to support his work, and to share also that to work with him as a guide, I think is a beautiful experience of working with someone of really high integrity and dedication and just heartfelt kindness and dedication to the sacredness of this work, and just really bow to your process and your journey to arrive here and to share these gifts with the world now.